Let me show you the 8 levels of financial independence. You may find different versions from other sources, but this is what I've been following for many years. Course members can download this free PDF. So you'll have to first figure out your FIRE number based on your annual expenses. You can put the numbers there. Then you should write down how much you have invested so far to achieve financial independence. Your emergency fund will be about 2 years of your annual expenses. You're gonna write it down here too. And level 1 is to become completely debt-free, except for your mortgage. Getting to the first level was difficult for me to do when I had over $110,000 in total consumer debt. If you have any credit cards, student loans, car loans, or 401k loans, you need to pay those off as soon as possible. And level 2 is when you have your cash reserve built to make sure you don't get back into debt again. I always recommend having at least 5 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account and 1 month of expenses in your primary checking account. And level 3 is when you achieve your first milestone by investing $100,000. Getting from level 2 to level 3 is quite difficult if your savings rate is low, but once you get to your first 100,000, your number will grow exponentially. This is why you want to pour everything you can to get to your first $100,000. And level 4 is poverty fire. And I know it sounds so weird to be retired at the poverty line, but this is actually the income level based on the Census Bureau's poverty line. So when the poverty income was $15,000 per person in the year 2024, if you multiply that by 25, that's going to be $375,000. By getting to $375,000 in investments is actually a milestone. We just happen to call it poverty fire because it's at the poverty line. And level 5 is lean fire, and that's not an easy milestone to achieve. If you double the poverty fire number, you're gonna be at the lean fire number. If you're a couple, I recommend adding about a third of that to the fire number. And people on lean fire can typically retire early at the 25% income percentile based on the income levels in the US household adjusted by inflation every year. They practice frugality and minimalism throughout their journey. And level 6 is fire, or some people call it the traditional fire. If you double the lean fire number, generally speaking, that's gonna be your traditional fire number per individual. And level 7 is chubby fire. If you double the traditional fire number, you'll get to the chubby fire number. Chubby fire usually puts you in the 80th percentile and puts you in the semi-luxurious fire lifestyle. And level 8 is fat fire. If you double the chubby fire number, you'll get the fat fire number. This is when you're truly enjoying the luxurious lifestyle without really worrying about running out of money. And I always teach that your FIRE investment should be your annual expenses multiplied by 25. You should also have 2 years of cash reserves set aside in case of a stock market crash or a long-term recession. And course members, don't forget to download this free PDF, and I'd like to know what type of FIRE you would like to achieve. Now let's talk about lean FIRE. And the idea behind lean FIRE is to earn and invest enough to cover your basic expenses. This is generally for people living in a very frugal lifestyle, and their goal is to maintain those minimalistic habits going into their retirement. People on lean fire can typically retire early at the 25% income percentile based on the income levels in the US household adjusted by inflation every year. You can always look up the household income percentiles in the United States to find how it's adjusted by inflation annually. And just like any fire strategy, people on lean fire first figured out their fire number, but with an emphasis on frugality. The lean fire community is very unique because they focus on frugality and minimalism. The typical fire number is based on the location, but it could be anywhere between $750,000 and $1 million. And that's annual expenses of between $30,000 and $40,000 per year. And most lean fire people I've talked to will have their mortgages paid off by the time they retire early, but they do include their property taxes and insurance in their fire number. And they also have to include utilities to keep the house running, like electricity, gas, water, sewer, and trash. They also include the internet and subscription services to the fire number. They include groceries and some days they eat out, but they don't eat out as much as other fire people I know. They're extremely frugal when it comes to groceries and eating out. They have transportation included in their fire number, but it's really just gas money and basic vehicle maintenance because their vehicles will be completely paid off. They also have to account for any healthcare expenses when they're not employed. Health insurance without an employer is generally higher than those who are employed. And a typical lean fire living in the US will have the house paid off, but it really depends on each person's situation. There are lean fire people living abroad who don't need a lot to retire early. If you're not a frugal person already, but you're interested in pursuing lean fire, you're going to need to pick a location with a lower cost of living and significantly reduce your expenses. And that might be hard to find in the US. You might even need to consider paying off your mortgage before your early retirement to meet the goal of your lean fire number. And because of their minimalistic living, they may not even need to withdraw the basic 4% out of the entire portfolio. If you're choosing the lean fire lifestyle, your $1 million portfolio could come a long way if you're living somewhere that doesn't cost you more than 3% of your portfolio. You may not even have to adjust for inflation as much because of the low cost of living expenses. And you just have the portfolio grow year over year with the spread between the withdrawal and the portfolio growth. So let's take a look at the lean fire calculator. Let's say you're 25 years old and your lean fire number is $1 million and you're looking to retire by the age of 45 using your taxable brokerage account. And assuming that the market performs a 7% average annual return, your savings rate will matter more than how the market performs. If you save 25% of your income, making $100,000 a year, you should have $750,000 in 16 years and $1 million in 21 years. If you can't do 25% right away, then start with 15% and then increase your savings rate by 2% annually or as much as you can. And let's say you hit the lean fire number at the age of 40 here. Let's use the fixed percentage withdrawal strategy at 4% right there. That's going to be about $30,000 a year in early retirement. And you can decrease your withdrawal rate initially by 3% or 3.5% to create that spread between your withdrawal rate and the portfolio growth. And people on lean fire are extremely careful with how much they withdraw because they focus on frugality and minimalism to make sure the portfolio doesn't run out of money. And maintaining that withdrawal rate at 4% will increase your early retirement income based on portfolio growth. If the portfolio does poorly in the market, then you could have a lower income coming in that year. Whether lean fire is right for you or not will depend entirely on your current lifestyle expenses. Are you already frugal or practicing minimalism? Lean fire folks can get out of the rat race at the 25% income percentile, which means you're making more than a quarter of the households in the US without working. And just keep in mind that the data for the household income percentiles does not show the local cost of living or taxes. You have to calculate your own lean fire number based on where you want to live and your annual expenses. The other risk of doing a lean fire is if you ever go through a major life-changing event that creates higher annual expenses, could create a pressure on your investment portfolio. If our economy goes through a long-term recession, you'll have to make sure your lean fire portfolio does not run out of money. By the way, I am so fired up to announce the launch of my private FIRE community for people just like you and me who are passionate about investing, saving, and achieving financial independence and exploring different possibilities to retire early. My private community will allow you to connect with me on the platform and get in touch with other like-minded individuals or couples who are just as serious as you are with the FIRE movement. As a member of my private community, you'll get resources like investing, saving, paying off debt, or finding the right place to grow your money. The idea behind Fat Fire is to have almost unlimited lifestyle options. And we call the strategy FAT because people on Fat Fire have higher retirement expenses than the average person or household. This is generally for people living a luxurious lifestyle with an investment portfolio of over $5.5 million or more. And their goal is to maintain the same high spending habits going into their retirement. Your net worth should be at a minimum of 8 figures. And getting to Fat Fire means that you are in the top 10% of households by income and getting that passively. How fat you want to go will be subjective, depending on the cost of living and lifestyle choices. If you retire early in the US at the bare minimum, your Fat Fire number should be starting at $220,000 a year or $5.5 million in your investment portfolio. These are based on the 2024 numbers. But if your current income is even higher than the 95th percentile or 99th percentile, then your income could be a lot higher to $300,000 or $600,000 per year. Your portfolio will need to be at least $7.5 million or $15 million if you're looking to invest or have at least $600,000 in passive income. Those numbers will go up annually with inflation, but these numbers are absolutely huge if you compare them to the average American household. And you're probably wondering, how the heck does an average American make $200,000 or more in income to have $5 or $10 million in investments? I'll be completely honest with you. It is not impossible, but it won't be easy for you to achieve Fat Fire if your income is less than $200,000 a year. You can achieve it, but you'll need to start early, like in your 20s or 30s, to invest at least $120,000 a year to get to 5.5 million in 20 years. And that's assuming your investment portfolio makes a 7% average annual return. But there are high-paying jobs like software engineers working at one of the major tech companies. I have met many software engineers who make $300,000, $400,000, or $500,000 a year, or a lawyer working at a major law firm. While these job sectors will give you a better opportunity to save over 6 figures annually into your investments, not everyone is willing to make the sacrifice now to save 50, 60, or 70% of their income. There are people who make over $200,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck because they have a high student loan balance, multiple vehicle loans, and credit card debt. No matter how much money you make, it always comes down to your behavior spending. People on Fat Fire don't take out debt that adds no value to their growth, but they are likely to take out debt that adds value or reduces tax liabilities. These people are extremely smart with their money because they focus on their long-term vision and find different ways to reduce their tax liabilities, because taxes are always going to be an issue for high income earners. And there are also professional athletes who achieved a very high savings rate because they knew they weren't going to last forever in the sports industry. If you read the story about Rob Gronkowski, who was a start tight end for the New England Patriots and Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady for many, many years, he saved all of his NFL salaries for the first 8 seasons of his NFL career and just live off of endorsement deals. He still wears the same clothes from his college days and tries to live as frugally as possible. And these are the smart professional athletes who are thinking about their long-term plans. And I have no doubt that Gronk has already Fat Fired. And the most common Fat Fire people I have met are people who own a business or working as C-level executives. And some people have sold their small businesses or got acquired by a large cap company to get a buyout. The compensation package can be in the 7 or 8 figure range before taxes. And I've consulted with several CEOs with their companies making 8 figures in stock-based compensation. And I'm a small business owner and I have a higher potential of turning my business into a multi-million-dollar business if I run my company efficiently. And I'll be a little bit biased here and say that if you want to achieve Fat Fire number, you need to consider starting a business, switching to a big tech job, or getting on the executive track. Your income absolutely matters because making $100,000 a year with a 50% savings rate is $50,000 a year, right? But making $300,000 a year and saving 70% of your income will get you to your Fat Fire numbers so much faster. And you're still going to be living on $100,000 a year instead of $300,000 a year, right? And that's the whole idea of Fat Fire. So again, Fat Fire is to maintain your fat lifestyle. And I'm talking about taking multiple vacations every year overseas. Not every Fat Fire person owns a private jet, but they do choose to fly first class. Every person has their own definition of what's considered luxury. I would never buy any brand name materials like clothes or jewelry, but I would absolutely purchase first class tickets for every international trip. They're also most likely to have multiple locations to retire to instead of just one location. They could have a primary home somewhere in the States and vacation homes somewhere else, maybe overseas. They may want to live somewhere that's considered a higher cost of living because they prefer to have instant access to the nearby businesses. I know some Fat Fire people who prefer to rent because they don't want to store their cash in a primary residence. You may find this very hard to believe, but many high income earners prioritize their investments over buying luxury homes initially. It depends entirely on where you want to live or where you want to retire to. And Fat Fire people do pay higher fees for healthcare to get the best healthcare available to them. Health is something that they do prioritize over anything else because how do you spend money if you're always sick, right? And Fat Fire with kids will most likely pay for private tuition expenses unless they're in a very good public school system, which is very rare in the States nowadays. And the one expense Fat Fire people pay very close attention to is taxes. If you're married, your household income in the top 10% could be as low as 24%. But if you're single, your marginal tax rate is already at 32%. When you're retired on your Fat Fire investments, there are ways to reduce your tax liabilities by taking out debt against their investments, like the securities-based lines of credit. Debt is not taxable in the eyes of the IRS, and Fat Fire people understand that using a mix of debt and capital gains can significantly reduce their tax liabilities, which is a topic for another video. So how much do you think you'll need to invest every year to achieve Fat Fire? So let's say you're 25 years old with a 7% average annual return. You're gonna need to invest at least $120,000 a year to have $5.7 million by the time you turn 45 years old, right around there, okay? So it's not gonna be easy to do if your income is less than $220,000 a year, right? But is it doable? Absolutely. But remember that your savings rate really matters the most. If you make $250,000 a year, try investing $120,000 to maybe $150,000 a year. That's a 50 to 60% savings rate. And some people get millions of dollars from selling their businesses or real estate. And this is when hyper accumulation really occurs, right? That's when it begins. What if you get a $100,000 real estate deal, you sell it with equity, you put that immediately into the taxable brokerage account, and just imagine how fast that can grow for you. And it's not about saving 25% of your income anymore, but saving 50, 60, 70, or even 80% of your income to get to that Fat Fire number as quickly as you can. For people already on their Fat Fire journey, I don't have to explain any of this to them because they already understand how this works. If you're brand new to the Fat Fire concept, just know that it is possible for you to get to 5 million, 10 million, or even 20 million, but you have to be realistic about your current income. Can you switch jobs now to get to a higher income level? Can you start a business to potentially bring in an additional 6 or 7 figures in revenue? Your savings rate always matters, but your income will matter more in the Fat Fire concept.